Hello, everyone. I just want to first start off by saying thank you to the Association for Humanistic Counseling to allow me to present my poster in like a video format. This is the first time I've actually done it in this particular format, but nonetheless, I think it should be pretty informative and pretty, exciting actually. So, I would like to start off by introducing myself. My name is Sam Shields. I am a recent graduate of Monmouth University's clinical mental health counseling program. And this research started about 3 years ago. Um, yeah, 2018. It's kind of hard to believe it's been that long, but it started back in 2018. And I kind of wanted to make mention of that because I know the climate recently, as far as racial climate, things have definitely been heightened, to say the least. So I wanted to point out that this research actually started back in 2018. Nonetheless, it was because of a George Floyd like incident. So let me try to tell you a bit of a story, and then we'll certainly dig into the research. So one morning I woke up, and like most mornings, like most people probably, I checked my cell phone, um, which I don't do that any longer. But on that particular morning, I checked my cell phone, and there was an image of an unarmed black man being pretty much like assaulted by police, um, like beat, choked, things like that, violent. And it infuriated me. I mean, I guess I was just getting so tired of images like that, especially being right on my phone. It's not even like you go turn on the TV anymore. It's right in your hand, right at your fingertips. So that particular morning, watching that video, it really infuriated me. And just as a moment of self-disclosure, I was very angry, and I don't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something. I wanted to like take action. So this is where, I guess, if you want to say, my past and my present sort of collided. It was like, okay, all of my whole life experiences, you know, um, just being a black man in America. I mean, basically, growing up my entire life in America and being subjected to all the different things that go on. Racial profiling. The police, harassing you and things of that nature. And then you have like the present. This awesome graduate school education that I am very grateful and thankful that I had the privilege to be able to acquire. And it was that thinking that made me say, Sam, I understand how you're feeling. You're in your emotions right now, but you can't respond to something like that in that manner. So it made me say, wow, here I am, pretty much like, if you want to consider it like a privileged black man, in terms of I'm privileged because I'm gainfully employed. I have health insurance. Um, you know, yeah, I mean, just basically privileged. Receiving a graduate education. All of those things put me in, I guess, maybe a different space than some other folks. So it made me say, well, what can I do, or what would be the best course of action for me? And it made me say, well, wow, if I feel like this, maybe other folks feel like this too. So that's what led me to what you see here as a poster: ongoing traumatic stress disorder. I have actually presented this poster at Georgian Court University as well as Monmouth University, and I also had the opportunity to present at the New Jersey Counseling Association, their virtual conference in 2020. So I'm extremely excited to be able to present this information again. And if you will, uh, just kind of keep following me with this story that I'm going to tell. Now, before I tell the story, I want to ask a question. Has anyone heard of Elizabeth Smart? Elizabeth Smart. She was a young girl about the age of 14. She was abducted from her home at Knife Point, and she was like held prisoner, held captive for about maybe 9 months, where she was like beaten and raped and threatened daily, threatening her life. And she was, able to sort of like escape, and like the police found her, and she was able to be returned to her home after about 9 months. And what I would like to ask is, if a person is abducted the way Elizabeth was, and experienced trauma, even for like a short period of time, like 9 months, and of course it probably didn't seem like a short period while she was going through that, so I don't want to discount that. But even if it was a period of time, would that traumatic event or experience, would that impact them for a few years, or would it impact them for the rest of their life? Okay, wait, say it again, a little louder. In the back. Oh, right. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, that person would be impacted for the rest of their life. So now that we're already on the same page with that, all right, now I really want you to bear with me as I try to weave all of these pieces of this puzzle together. The story is going to go back to the African shores, where Africans were, either captured or sold, bartered, whatever the case may be. They ended up on slave ships in, the transatlantic slave route, and basically, ended up in America. So you have people who are being ripped from their native country, their culture, their language, their rituals, everything. A person is stripped from everything. Once you're stripped of everything, you then get put on this ship, and I mean, you go on pretty much the worst boat ride. I don't even want to call it a cruise, because that sounds like it may be pleasant, but just the worst boat trip of your life, only to land in a foreign place and to realize you're enslaved. So if that isn't or wasn't bad enough, after about 400 years or so of being enslaved, then you have a point where you have like an emancipation, if you will, slaves being freed. And even with the slaves being freed, then there's like new rules that are formed or created. And what do you mean by that, Sam? Thank you. I'm glad you asked. So slavery was, outlawed, abolished, or whatever you like to, the terminology you like to use. But what happened was there was a loophole created in the penal code that said if a person was a criminal, then that person could, for lack of a better way to describe it, be enslaved, become a prisoner, incarcerated. So that meant lots of black folks were just being rounded up for just basically being black folks. And even when you move past that period, it's just segregation, things like redlining for the housing, all types of discrimination and disparities, especially in healthcare. Later on, if I have time, I'll bring up Henrietta Lacks. I'm sure some of you have probably heard about her. She's a medical marvel, a black woman. But I don't want to get too far off base. I only have a short period of time, so I'm trying to put out as much information as I can. But basically, to go back to the story, it's like a group of people have been basically exposed to all these different traumas, if you will, and um, there were like lynchings, public lynchings. You know, people would come out with their family and things like that. There were lynchings, and again, just like fast forwarding to kind of bring the story to a close, and then I can dive into some of this research here. Um, it's like when you come to modern day times, these police shootings have almost like replaced lynchings, and they've been made public thanks to social media. And a lot of these injustices that African Americans or blacks, experience have an impact, not just physically but also mentally. So I want to turn just for a moment to the poster to just point out how some of my objectives for doing this research was really just to introduce some new ways of thinking about the phenomenon of being black in America. And I wanted to use science and statistics to actually try to explain some behaviors and things like that. Also, I would like to very much create interest in research areas that pertain directly to African Americans. Most of the research that's done in this country is pretty much done on white males. So we'd definitely like to have some research that's targeting African Americans, because there's so many things that impact African American lives. I also wanted to use some of the research to connect the dots to some of the healthcare disparities that are out there. And although my target audience, it really is blacks in the United States, or blacks who are descendants of the African diaspora. And I also came to believe that it would also be very helpful for even like indigenous people of North America, because they've had a lot of similar like injustices and discrimination and things like that happen to them. Some of the effects that all of those traumas can have on a person is like poor family health and obesity. We know that black women have a higher infant mortality rate. Diabetes and renal failure, African Americans also lead in that, especially to be a minority. So on the behavioral health side, we're also talking about increased substance use disorder, increased stigma in the black community when you're talking about things like substance use disorder and mental health. And one of the main areas of study that I was able to come across was the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experience study, and that was done on employees of Kaiser Permanente out in California. And I'm only pointing that out because when the study was done, it was done on folks that were like gainfully employed, who had health insurance and things like that. So the reason why I'm calling this ongoing traumatic stress disorder is because when you compare it to things like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as PTSS, which maybe you have or maybe you haven't heard of it, post-traumatic slave syndrome. So the major difference in ongoing traumatic stress disorder versus the PTSD and the PTSS is that there is no post. Both of those theories suggest that the traumatic event or the experience has ended and it's over, and you can now move on to healing. But as I mentioned, when you move from one thing to the next, one thing to the next, one thing to the next, and when I'm saying one thing to the next, I'm just talking about everything from discrimination, redlining, poor health care, access to health care, food deserts, things of that nature, the police harassment, the police shootings, all of these things that just continue. Almost every week or every day there's a new headline where there's something that's basically impacting African Americans' lives. So This was really just a quick commercial about OGTSD. I hope if you have questions, you reach out and let me know. But in the interest of time, I do have to go. I hope that whet your appetite, and please feel free to ask me questions. I'll be around. Thanks again for this opportunity. I hope you have a wonderful time at conference. Goodbye.